Hey, folks, welcome back to Conservative Arkansas Media. I'm Paul Harrell. Some of the remnants of the Asa Hutchinson administration are still here, but the Senate Rules Committee this week nixed a whole bunch of last-minute appointees the former governor tried to sneak in at the last minute. More on that in just a moment. But we have a great show for you. Here in a second, we're going to talk about felons, gun rights, and when it's appropriate or when it's not appropriate to strip away someone's Second Amendment rights. So stay tuned for that. But first, for a follow-up segment on our coverage of Senator Gary Stubblefield's bill that would ban men from dressing up like women and then prancing around in front of young children at public venues. It passed out of the committee last week, and we got to speak to Senator Stubblefield immediately after. But then it was debated on the full, in front of the full Senate on the floor yesterday, and it was quite the debate. The bill passed with 29 yeas and 6 nays. For those of you keeping count, there are 29 Republicans in the Senate chamber in Arkansas and 6 Democrats. So it was a party line vote, and we have the archive footage, and we're going to take a listen. Republicans fighting to save children from perverts. Let's go to the screen and we'll take a listen. This is Senator Gary Stubblefield up first, presenting his bill. This was on Tuesday of this week, trying to save children.
Colleagues, I've been here 12 years, and every day, every Thursday when we leave, usually on Thursdays, I get home and the first thing I do is go in, help my wife unload everything because my wife comes with me every trip, and I hit my voicemail, which is always full. Well, this last week, when I hit my voicemail, I heard some of the most vulgar, obscene language that I didn't even know exist. I really didn't. I've never heard these words put together before by a group of people that want other people to bring their children and put them in front of them so they can read a book. And I thought, I can't think of any redeeming quality, anything good that can come from taking children and putting them in front of a bunch of grown men who are dressed like women. I thought and I thought and I thought. I couldn't come up with anything.
Imagine that.
This bill is really very simple. It reclassifies what a drag performance is. And let me just go through it real briefly with you. And by the way, I have also a testimony of a Miss Kitty Demure, who is a drag queen. Let me read to you what she says. I have absolutely no idea why you would want to influence your child. Would you want a stripper or porn star to influence your child? It makes no sense at all. I have no idea why you would want drag queens to read books to your children. I have no idea. What in the heck has a drag queen ever done to have you have so much respect for them and admire them so much that putting on makeup, jumping up on the floor, writhing around on stage is going to help your child?
A couple of things. Can you believe that we live in a day and age where this even has to be said out loud? These are now the arguments. These are now our arguments, Man, and I have to admit, a long time ago, I had social issue fatigue. Not anymore. Because you know what? You know what the truth of the matter is here? And we're going to get back to the audio here in just a second because you're going to need to hear Senator Stephanie Flowers. The truth of the matter here is I don't know how you're going to solve complicated, and this is probably more at the federal level at this point because, again, I mean, you're still going to run into issues within the Republican Party, but because you have these supermajorities. But, those of you who want to solve a smaller moral problem like, let's say, the national debt, or we're spending more money than we have. Yes, that can, moral problems shouldn't do that, shouldn't go into debt, shouldn't shouldn't. But if you're going to solve that problem when you're sitting across a table and you're negotiating with somebody who believes that drag queens should have full access to your children at public venues, or parents should be able to subject their child to sexualized behavior and the gyrations, and I mean, if you think you're going to solve tax policy when this is going on and we have to negotiate, I just at this point, I don't think it's possible. I do not think it is possible until we take these depraved ideas and we defeat them, honestly. But anyway, back to this, back to Senator Gary Stubblefield from Tuesday.
And I understand that you want to look like you are with it, that you're cool, that you're woke, that you're not a Nazi, that you're not a homophobe, whatever it may be. But you can raise your child to be a normal, regular, everyday child without including them in gay sexual things. That wasn't written by me. That was written by a drag queen. We live in a world today that is so unlike the world that I grew up in that it's hard for me to even take it in. We're seeing things today that no one could have predicted 40, 50 years ago. Morally, we're going down a funnel. It's like Thomas Jefferson said. He said, America will never be taken over from the outside. We'll be taken over from the inside.
You know, and I don't even think, I get Senator Stubblefield's strategy here, reading a drag queen in his own words saying, hey, this is too far for me. I'm a drag queen with standards, which in my previous point. But we all know, at this point, come on, you don't really have to have the drag queen's testimony in order to prove your point, right? It's just a thought.
Like what happened to Rome and many other countries, from moral decay from the inside. California currently has 67 different, you can identify in California, if you're a child, 67 different genders. Now, when you take one of these little kids and put them in front of drag queens that are men dressed up like women, do you think that helps them or confuses them in regard to their own gender? We have a lot of kids today that are so confused about their own gender that some of them are having to go to psychologists and get help. And yet that's exactly what's taking place all over this country.
All right, so here in just a second, and you know what, we're going to go ahead and skip to this if we can. So that's Senator Stubblefield there, and then Senator Stephanie Flowers. She rises for a question, and they decide, or Stephanie Flowers has a problem with in the committee last week when the bill passed. Senator Stubblefield cited a verse in Deuteronomy saying that it's an abomination for men to wear women's clothes. Okay, so Senator Flowers takes issue with this, and and then there's a debate over the Old and New Testament and antinomianism. Anyway, this is what it was. Listen.
And thank you for taking my question, Senator Stubblefield. Now you bring God up into this.
Her audio gets better in just a moment.
And,
she has some microphone problems.
That concerns me. And I watched the debate in City County Local last Thursday by way of the internet. Really what concerns me...
Sister Flowers, I apologize, but I'm having trouble hearing.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got this thing on. I was trying to hear down there. And maybe I need to turn it off.
Or maybe you could remove your mask. Maybe that would help us hear you a little bit better.
I watched the debate in City County Local last Thursday, and I was concerned You brought up God here today. I'm a God-fearing person. In the committee, you identified yourself as a Christian. You cited scripture in the Bible from Deuteronomy 25th verse. I guess you know that's part of the Torah, the Old Testament, Judaic law. And as Christians, we look more to the New Testament. And what concerns me more about this bill, because the New Testament preaches love of all, regardless. And what concerns me about this, it appears to me you're trying to put a target on people's backs that are not, according to you, normal. People have been cross-dressing for centuries.
I feel like I have to interject. Yes, people have been cross-dressing. That's why it's in the Bible and it says don't do it. To your point, that's why he cited Deuteronomy, is saying just because people have always done it. And again, the New Testament is all about love and everything else. No, the truth is we worship the same God. The Christians worship the same God that is in the Old Testament, the New Testament. It's the same being. And so you have to make these passages make sense because they don't contradict one another. You may want them to contradict one another, so you don't have to pay attention to what the Word of God says. But you know what, Senator Gary Stubblefield, if any of you were thinking, well, I know New Testament verses that condemn homosexuality, just wait, because so does Senator Gary Stubblefield.
It happened in Europe. They powdered their faces, made them whiter, put on rouge, wore wigs. Even our founding fathers did that. Do you agree with that? Do you believe that Christians believe in the New Testament?
Have you read Romans 1, Senator Flowers?
Do you believe, I'm asking the question.
Romans 1 is in the New Testament.
Senator Stubblefield, if you'll hold off for a minute. Senator Flowers, do you have a specific question about the bill at hand?
What is your question, Senator?
What is the question about the bill that Senator has
proposed? How he
proposed?
relates this to God, and this is sin. You know, when you start citing the Bible and stuff, we all have different opinions about this. And for that community of the LGBTQ, or whoever decides to cross-dress, put on a wig, wear a clothing that is not identical to what you were born
It's about
as a
kids,
male or whatever.
ignoring the issue.
I don't understand the purpose of this, because we already have laws that prevent lewd, lascivious behavior. So what is your point other than to get national media attention?
I'm not looking for national media attention, Senator Flowers.
Well, would you agree that...
Let me first clarify your first question.
Oh.
You talked about the Torah in the Old Testament. Romans speaks more about this particular sin in the New Testament than the Torah did in the Old Testament. And as far as dressing, anyone can still put on a robe, they can dress, they can go anywhere they want to go.
But you're targeting people.
No, I'm not targeting anyone.
Yes, you are. But I guess you've answered my question, so I'll sit down and let somebody else ask it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Don't you just love when the dividing lines between the political parties are stark and clear, and I don't know, it just, good job, Senate Republicans, for doing this. Thank God for you for standing up and doing the right thing concerning our children. Too many of us, for too long, myself included, in the past, have approached a, well, I personally disagree with that choice, but that is your right. We, at this point, have seen the fruits of that, and we have been sold a bill of goods that, quite frankly, in the conservative world, has failed to conserve really anything. We have conserved very, very little. And I think people have had enough, and we've got to find a way to get this pendulum to swing back the other way, and not just, of course, I said not just tip our hat to a higher power or to God or to the Christian God of the Bible, but we don't even do that anymore. We don't even do that anymore. As I've said many times, we need strong families. Well, why? I mean, we certainly don't need families that are like, oh yeah, let's take our 5-year-old to a drag show. Well, why do we need strong families? Well, Republican secularists say, well, that's because it's good for society. Well, yeah, but why? Well, we're not supposed to talk religion and politics. The truth is, maybe you should be required to talk religion when you're talking about politics. Because based on what standard is a strong family good? Because it's what God would have for us. Not because we're just going to get the derivatives and the benefits from good, strong families. And this is, in my opinion, that right there, this is the issue of our time. And we have, if we're going to claw our way back up this slippery slope, we got a lot of work to do. I told you a second ago we were going to be. I told a second ago about former holdovers from the Asa Hutchinson administration. So, if you go back to the inauguration of Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and I'll just, this is the headline here that is sparking all of this, and I saw this a couple of days ago. This is from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. State Senate Committees by Michael Wickline. Headline: State Senate Committee rejects 36 Hutchinson nominees for appointment. Okay, so this bill, or this phenomenon happened. So if you go back, this is what I'm told. According to sources, I can give you background on this, okay? There were many people, many legislators were kind of taken aback at a last-minute request of Governor Asa Hutchinson. Now, depending on which reports you read, people who are, a spokesperson for the former governor says this was routine, this was normal. From what I am hearing, and this may be because there aren't enough people down at the Capitol who remember because they weren't there, but from what I am hearing, nobody can remember something like this ever happening. As Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders was going to address the full chamber of the General Assembly, I'm told that this list of new appointees that the former outgoing governor at the 11th hour was requesting to fill all of these boards and stuff with his choices, with his picks. And I'm told that the Senate, obviously, especially the Senate committee, said, no, that we're not going to do that unless, I think they let a few of them through. As a matter of fact, there's a follow-up story to this here from yesterday. At first, they only, I think they added 5 new names. So they rejected most of them, but the follow-up story would be the state Senate confirms 19 of former governor's appointees to state boards. So anyway, but the point is that people thought this was odd. And it was rejected. Now the makeup of the Senate committee we have here, that it all kind of went down, crashed and burned in the Senate Rules Committee. Just so you know, here are some of the members there. You've got the chair there, Senator Penzo, and then the additional members, Stephanie Flowers there, Jonathan Dismang, Ronald Caldwell, Gary Stubblefield again, Scott Flippo, Blake Johnson, Dave Wallace, and Ricky Hill. These were the, and then you have the Democrat vice chair there, Fred Love. They voted it down. And anyway, I don't know if, I just don't, it's just kind of palace intrigue there. Interesting that a lot of these requested appointments got. So again, when we opened this broadcast last week, we said New Day in Arkansas. Not only is it a new day in Arkansas with the election of Governor Sarah Sanders, but we also have the Arkansas legislature acknowledging that it's a new day, because some of the debate in the committee was, hey, isn't Governor Sanders the governor now? And shouldn't we allow her to make these appointments? instead of Governor Hutchinson trying to make these appointments at the last minute. I got to tell you, some in the legislature were offended by that, and they used their legislative authority appropriately. Folks, when we come back, don't go anywhere. We'll be back here in just a moment, and we're going to talk gun rights in Arkansas. This is CAM Media. My name is Paul Harrell. Back in just a moment. And welcome back. So imagine this situation for a moment. You're a young and foolish man in his early 20s who does something stupid. In fact, it's more than stupid. You break the law and commit a felony, but not the kind of felony you might watch in gruesome detail on Law and Order Special Victims Unit. No, in this hypothetical scenario, our admittedly foolish man commits a non-violent felony crime. It is a crime, and he must pay his debt according to what the law requires. Specifically, let's say it has something to do with drugs or alcohol, or maybe he stole or vandalized property and no one got physically hurt or was threatened, or maybe he went around town forging checks, or maybe it was a white-collar crime. The list could go on, but you get the picture. This person is then charged and sentenced and begins to serve the time for his criminal behavior. And while in prison, thankfully, he sees the error of his ways. He realizes crime, in fact, does not pay and is eager to finish his sentence and start a family, join a church, maybe even have a business of his own one day. And all of that is fine and good. But what if there are obstacles in his way after he gets out of prison and has served his time that prevent him from lawfully and legally protecting his precious family and business from violent criminals in our increasingly violent world? Well, in Arkansas right now, he can't, because in Arkansas, if you commit a felony of any kind, you lose your Second Amendment right to own a gun. Does that seem fair? Some think so. Does that seem right? Some think so. That's why there's a debate to be had. And that's what the law currently says. And so if you don't like what the law currently says, you'll need to change the law. But how? How would you go about it? Well, surely we wouldn't just give every nonviolent felon a weapon upon exiting prison. No, I think most Arkansans, to even entertain this idea, would want there to be a process and a way to prove you are, in fact, reformed and you are not going to go from being a nonviolent felon to a violent one. Democrat State Representative Vivian Flowers, who serves in the Arkansas General Assembly, has drafted a bill to restore Second Amendment rights to nonviolent felons after a process and a period of time, and it is sure to spark an interesting debate, and that's why I reached out to her, and I wanted to have her on, and she agreed to come on. State Representative Flowers, thank you so much for being with us. Why don't you tell us about your bill?
Thank you so much for having me on, Paul. I wanted, so you've laid out a very interesting scenario, because that is exactly the scenario. It's not hypothetical. That is actually what happened to my constituent. And I always tell people some of the best ideas and the best legislation that I believe that I've been able to pass has come from my constituents. And this is such a measure, such a draft bill. I got a call over 2 years ago from a constituent who had committed a drug crime, and he served his time. And, probably almost 20 years later, he had a family and a business and a job and a home, which he could not protect. His wife couldn't even protect it, not having been a felon, because they obviously lived together. And, what was strange to me then is, his business was landscaping, which of course he accommodated customers who lived out in the county. And I didn't know that riding lawnmower jacking is a thing. And because it is, he was hesitant to have his son with him in running that business, unlike what people whose rights have, who maintain Second Amendment rights, can do. And it just struck me that this person committed a crime that was directly or generally a victimless crime. He had served his debt, And it had been, again, almost 20 years. And he couldn't enjoy the constitutional rights that the rest of us do. And in my mind, I was disturbed at the thought that he was still, being imprisoned, so to speak, um, when he had paid his debt. And honestly, when I started working on the bill, um, I was not even distinguishing between um, nonviolent and violent, because I feel like, if you're still a threat, maybe you ought to still be in prison. But if you're not, then you should have an opportunity to be made whole and to move forward and really have an incentive to continue to live, a peaceful, law abiding life. And when you're set apart from the rest of society and you're not able to protect yourself, you're not able to get housing, you're not able to get a job like the rest of us, I don't know how we expect that person to be successful. But as I began to work on the bill, I learned that Senator Stubblefield and Senator Caldwell were working on the issue, and we actually joined forces. And they kind of let me take the lead and dig into the issue. And we met with and were able to secure partnership and support from ACIC, and that's the entity, the governmental entity that keeps and maintains and shares the data around criminal imprisonment and prosecution and that kind of thing, convictions. Um, Also, the state police, their attorney helped us draft the bill and deal with the issue around the federal law, because federal law makes it so that, when you have committed a felony of any sort, that under federal law, you cannot regain your Second Amendment rights. And then we also met with the Prosecutors Association and laid out every concern, made sure that we identified all felonies and some misdemeanors, like misdemeanor domestic battery. Made sure that there was a list of exceptions so that we wouldn't make a mistake for the intent of this bill. And we just ran out of time last session. And obviously, since the laws have changed since then, we have come back. I pre filed the bill, and I pre filed it with no one on there just so I could get it filed, because we can't just put people's name on there. You have to get permission. And I filed it right before going out of town. So I pre filed the bill so that we could put it out there, go back to the drawing board and make sure that all of the codes were in sync with the legislation. I met again with the Prosecutors Association. I've since met with the representative of the NRA and a couple of other former members who I respect. And I think we have a good bill. Right now we're waiting on the amendments to the original language to be made, and we'll have one final round of meetings with all the stakeholders, including the governor's office, to ensure that all concerns have been addressed. And also, it'll give us a little bit of time to make sure that we get all of the supporting co-sponsors on the bill on the House and Senate side.
So, I mean, there's no question, State Representative Flowers, that this is a Second Amendment state, and not just for hunting, right? I mean, the people in Arkansas, they believe in the philosophical idea of the right to keep and bear arms, and so anytime you're going to take that right away, you have to be it has to be really good reason for it, and so. This is a rare example, and maybe you would agree. I mean, the two parties at this point have never, you could argue, have never been further apart or more different. And yet, on this issue, I think this is something that Republicans could find themselves supporting from a Second Amendment standpoint. So you mentioned some other Republicans in the Senate who are receptive to this, but what do you think the level of support is generally just across the entire, two chambers about this idea?
Yeah, funny you asked that because I think because we sort of um, assume where people are based upon partisan dogma, I would call it. Um, we we make those assumptions sort of guide our perceptions about what a bill really is. And I can tell you that I think initially there were some Republicans who thought that, like, what's her catch? But most people who know me well know that I have a concealed carry license, that I own before two, now three weapons, and I believe very deeply that that's my right to do so, and it should be a right made available to all law-abiding citizens. And in this case, law-abiding citizens who've made a mistake and committed a crime before, but paid their debt to society. And I get that we need to be careful as it relates to those who committed violent crimes. But for those whose crimes had nothing to do with violence or a weapon, it just makes no sense that after they paid their debt to society, that they would be prohibited from protecting their families or their homes or hunting with their families and friends. And so I think that this is a bill that everybody can get on board with. Even Mom's Demand is neutral on this bill.
Wow.
So I feel very confident that
Wow.
that's the that's one of my colleagues. I told one of my colleagues that the other day, and he said, "What kind of witchcraft do you practice?"
I mean, that's
And
very fortunate. That's very fortunate.
I told them no. I told them to watch out. But I think that there's again always this misnomer, because I think when we're dealing with tragedy and trying to figure out what common sense gun laws look like, we do often find ourselves on the opposite side, because there's such a fear and a perception about what making any change might mean. And hopefully working on something like this together could mean that we can work on other measures in the future for the best, you know, um, best interests of Arkansas and her people.
Last question. I really appreciate you spending time with us and detailing this, but and this may be a long answer, but what do you envision that process looking like? Okay, let's say you establish whatever the criteria for a non-violent felon is, whatever that is,
Mhm.
but then how do they? When do they actually, under this bill, if it becomes law, how would they actually get their Second Amendment right back? It wouldn't be immediate, would it?
Well, I'm thinking about putting an emergency clause on it, but I mean, I don't know.
No,
It probably wouldn't be immediate because and I get what you're saying. Because we'll need some time to flesh out the rules and regs. But the bottom line is, if you meet the criteria as having completed your disposition with the state, so, prison, parole, probation, fines, fees, and um, 10 years has passed since the date of conviction of a nonviolent felony, you are there, you are not the subject of a criminal investigation, um, and I think one of the changes we made is that you are not the subject of a protective order or anything like that. Then there would be a process for you to um, begin the administration of um, transitioning to a status whereby you would be able to then own a weapon. And basically what we did is mirrored existing law. So for first time offenders who meet the criteria of first time offender, it's not a situation where somebody can decide, even though you meet this criteria, you still can't be made whole, or your charge can't be discharged and dismissed and sealed. That's basically what this is. is discharging, dismissing the felony, and sealing the record, um, with some exceptions, for someone who has met the criteria. So it takes it out of the realm of politics where some people get their rights restored and some don't. And we felt like, I mean, everyone I've talked to has felt like that is fair, and reasonable in the case of nonviolent, felony offenders.
State Representative Vivian Flowers, thanks so much for coming on the program. We really appreciate it, and thank you for educating the audience.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate
Alrighty.
you.
Folks, we're going to be right back
Okay,
with
take
State
care.
Representative Jeremy Wooldridge. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. So, Arkansas elections take place every 2 years, and most of the time, the power of incumbency is strong. I mean, we always complain about a do-nothing Congress, but the truth is, we send the same people back to into their positions of power quite regularly, cycle after cycle. And currently at the federal level, there are no term limits, but we do have term limits here in Arkansas, which most agree is a good thing. But even with term limits, which are designed to limit the perennial power of incumbency, we don't get to see new faces very often. But here at Conservative Arkansas Media, when I get the chance to interview someone new, I think it's always a good idea to get new perspectives on what it's like to run for office, get elected, and enter into the world of governing, legislating, and politicking. Jeremy Wooldridge is a freshman state representative serving District 1. He's from Marmaduke, and he joins us now. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on the program. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Paul. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about tell us a little bit about excuse me, I had the wrong setup there. Tell us just a little bit about what it's like running for office. First of all, I mean, what made you want to run for office?
Well, I tell you, it is more than just you. It's a process by which you can't do that alone. I've heard people say that throughout my life, people that have held elected positions at the local level, state level, and federal level, and it's bigger than you. And when you hear that statement, it is true that it's bigger than you. The process is overwhelming. It takes the support of your family. It takes the support of your community, and it just is a really humbling process.
Yeah, no doubt. And what made you want to do it? And what made you want to be a Republican? I mean, I know we've got super majorities now, but address that if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So, I feel like that constitutionally what makes me who I am is my faith. That's something that's fundamental for me. That's something that's basically a non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. So the principles that propel me are the principles of faith. Those align with the Republican Party. I'm a conservative fiscally, and then also on the social issues and things like that. So honestly, I have dedicated my life to service and serving others. This is not a new thing for me. I've been in mental health for a number of years, was a therapist there and a supervisor for an agency providing those services to individuals, trying to help them become their best version of themselves. And honestly, what propelled me to run was just to continue to be that voice for the voiceless, or folks that feel like they've been rendered voiceless by the process. I wanted to advocate for those individuals, felt like I had the ability to serve and the support of my family, and prayed about it, and the door was opened, and here I am.
Well, and it's always interesting to get a freshman perspective as well. So this, you're coming into your first term. This is your first legislative session. So I understand it's probably a learning curve. I mean, maybe not for all, but I would say for most. So what's it been like? What's the experience of getting to Little Rock and getting accustomed to everything?
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that has been wonderful about the process is the current folks that are here. We've got a great leadership. Matthew Shepard, the Speaker of the House, has been a wonderful leader of the House for a number of sessions now, and he's been extremely helpful in terms of orienting freshman members and creating an environment that not only we can be successful in, but have an opportunity to lead based on some knowledge and what we bring to the table from a background perspective. So that's been wonderful, been inclusive, and I'm grateful for the opportunities that have been afforded to me so far.
Well, and I know that let's just take, for example, the committee process. I mean, that's where the sausage is made and everything. So,
Right.
but I also know that freshmen aren't necessarily, typically going to get the most coveted committees, so to speak. So, what committees
Right.
did you end up on your first term?
Well, like I said, I bring a behavioral health background. I'm a licensed therapist, so I was fortunate enough to land a spot on public health, which deals with all of the licensure type issues for healthcare and other things around the state as my primary A committee. And aging children and youth, the foster care, some foster care issues, military affairs issues as my B committee. I think that I have some value that I can add to the process there. I'm an alternate on council, which is the legislature in the interim, and I'm the vice chairman of information technology and broadband expansion. So that's important to Northeast Arkansas, to my district specifically.
Yeah. Well, I know I kind of asked you this a little bit when we were scheduling the interview, but what's the feel in the legislature right now? I mean, with Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I mean, I know
Right.
this since you're a freshman, you kind of don't have anything you may not compare it to, when there was
Right.
the former administration versus the new administration. But from what I've been hearing, and feel free to disagree, a lot of people definitely feel like it's a new day, and that the state has certainly leapt to the right of the political spectrum. What are your thoughts, State Representative Wooldridge?
Right. I tell you, it's an exciting time to be in Arkansas, in my opinion. We've got a wide variety of new leaders, up and coming leaders that have kind of come up from different areas of the state, coming together collectively. I've told everyone I ran to be part of something bigger than me. I wanted to be a part of a body that is making a change in the lives of Arkansans, and I think that we all share that vision, that passion. Obviously, heavily majority, a super majority of Republicans in the House, a Republican governor, all constitutional officers. So it's an exciting time for Arkansas, and it's an opportunity for us to move the needle in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly good to meet you, State Representative Jeremy Wooldridge, and it's good to get your perspective on things. And I'm glad that you could spend some time with us, and we look forward to do it again. When we've got another issue in front of us that you could speak to. So we really do appreciate you, sir.
You bet, Paul. Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate you. Have a good afternoon.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that's all the time we have for this edition of Conservative Arkansas Media. We'll be back here next week with another legislative roundup. Thank you so much for watching, and be safe, Arkansas.